At the airport boarding gate, a black pilot calmly checks in, but a flight attendant publicly accuses him of lying about his position. Her arrogance sparks murmurs among the passengers. The pilot responds with dignity, leaving the moment on a cliffhanger as tension builds toward a shocking reveal. "We don't let passengers sneak in here pretending to be crew. Try that again and I'll have security drag you out." The woman's voice cut across the polished terminal like broken glass. 100 pairs of eyes shifted toward the source, Gate B-17 of Atlanta International Airport. Beneath the giant glass windows, the sun melted into the horizon, casting orange light over delayed passengers slouched in their seats. Children gnawed at candy bars, businessmen typed furiously on laptops, and a faint announcement echoed about a boarding call for another flight. At the center of it all stood a tall black man in a crisp navy blue uniform, gold wings pinned to his chest, hat tucked beneath one arm. His face was calm, unreadable, but his eyes carried years of storms weathered in silence. The flight attendant blocking him had her chin lifted with exaggerated pride. Her lipstick was sharp red, her smile cruelly satisfied. She gripped the boarding stand like it was her throne. "You heard me," she said louder, aware of the growing crowd. "Passengers don't belong here. That uniform, probably rented for attention." Murmurs rippled. A mother clutched her child closer. A teenager whispered to his father. Some people laughed nervously, others glanced away, pretending not to hear. The man didn't raise his voice. He only shifted slightly, adjusting the weight of the pilot's hat in his hand. His silence was heavier than her noise. "You think I'm joking?" The attendant leaned forward, her badge swinging against her blouse. "This is my gate, and liars don't pass." Her arrogance filled the air like a foul perfume. She took one step closer, and with deliberate contempt snatched the pilot's ID from the lanyard around his neck. The plastic snapped against its holder. Gasps broke from the bystanders. She held it up for everyone to see. "Fake, just like you." For a second, time stood still. The ID reflected the glow of the setting sun. It wasn't just plastic. It was years of training, sleepless nights, endless tests, and the quiet pride of a man who had carried hundreds of lives through storms. And now it dangled in her hand like cheap counterfeiting. The man finally spoke. His voice was steady, deep, carrying an authority that needed no microphone. "You've mistaken silence for weakness." His eyes locked on hers. The entire gate seemed to shrink under the weight of those words. He took one slow step forward, placing his hat carefully on the counter between them, not as surrender, but as challenge. Passengers leaned forward, phones half raised, waiting for what would come next. The attendant smirked, already imagining victory. But the man's final line cut through the terminal like a blade. "One call, and you'll regret touching what isn't yours." And with that, he reached into his jacket pocket. The crowd collectively held its breath, hanging on the edge of revelation. "Don't just stand there. Someone call security," the flight attendant snapped, her voice slicing through the uneasy air. No one moved. Passengers sat frozen in their seats, eyes darting from her to the man in uniform. The only sounds were the distant rumble of rolling luggage wheels and the hollow voice of an intercom announcing a flight to Chicago. A teenager near the corner whispered into his phone camera, "She thinks he's lying. But he looks like a real pilot." The black man didn't flinch. He simply picked up his hat from the counter and brushed a speck of dust from its brim, as though she hadn't just accused him of fraud in front of 100 strangers. "You really want to embarrass yourself further?" he asked quietly, but his words carried across the gate like thunder rolling beneath calm skies. The attendant scoffed, eyes flashing. "Embarrass myself? You're the one pretending." Do you think anyone believes you? She turned toward the passengers, her arms spread dramatically. Look at him, renting a costume, trying to sneak on my plane, desperate. A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact. Others shook their heads. An older white man in a business suit muttered under his breath, "Typical, always playing the victim card." His companion elbowed him sharply, whispering, "Keep your mouth shut, this doesn't look right." A little girl tugged on her mother's sleeve. "But Mommy, why would he lie? He looks nice." The mother hushed her, but her own eyes lingered on the pilot with quiet doubt. The man remained composed, his face unreadable. Years of insults, subtle and loud, had carved patience into his bones. But patience was not the same as weakness. The flight attendant slapped his ID against the counter. "This is fake, and if you don't walk away right now, I'll make sure. The police get involved." He tilted his head slightly, studying her, not with anger but with the weary recognition of someone who had seen this performance before. "You're loud," he said softly, "but loudness doesn't make you right." Her jaw tightened. The more he stayed calm, the more her confidence wavered. She pressed forward anyway, her pride too thick to retreat. "You think you can scare me with words?" she hissed. "This is my career, my territory, and liars don't." "Get through me." The pilot finally reached into his jacket pocket. The motion drew a collective gasp from the onlookers. Some leaned forward, others instinctively leaned back. Bracing for confrontation, he pulled out a sleek black phone. Calmly, deliberately, he dialed. The attendant barked a laugh. "What are you doing now, calling your imaginary boss? Maybe he'll tell me you're an astronaut too." Her laugh echoed, shrill and brittle. Yet beneath it, her eyes flickered with the first trace of uncertainty. The man raised the phone to his ear. His voice dropped, steady, commanding. "Captain, Williams here. Connect me to operations control immediately." The entire terminal fell silent. The word captain struck like a gavel. Passengers exchanged looks, confusion and realization mixing in their eyes. Someone whispered, "Wait, did he say captain?" The flight attendant froze, her smirk faltering for the first time. He turned slightly, his gaze sweeping over the silent crowd. His calm presence filled the space where her arrogance had once echoed. On the other end of the line, a voice answered with crisp efficiency. The passengers couldn't hear it, but they could see the shift in his expression, firm, unshaken, the posture of a man who had nothing to prove because his truth spoke for itself. The flight attendant's fingers twitched around the stolen ID. For the first time her hand trembled. And as he listened to the voice on the line, a small, knowing smile touched his lips. "Thank you," he said into the phone. "Send someone to gate B17, right away." The crowd exhaled in unison, like a storm was about to break. The attendant tried to recover, her voice rising in forced confidence. "So you made a phone call. Big deal. Nothing's going to happen." But her words didn't carry the same fire anymore. They fell flat, swallowed by the silence of passengers who were no longer sure of her story. And the man, Captain Williams, slid his phone back into his pocket with deliberate calm. "You're about to learn the cost of arrogance," he said quietly. The gate was no longer hers. It was his. "Ladies and gentlemen, please stay seated." The flight attendant tried to regain her composure, waving her arms as if she still commanded the space. But her voice quivered, betraying the steel she wanted to project. The crowd no longer obeyed her. Passengers leaned forward in their chairs, whispering furiously. Some filmed openly with their phones now, the tiny red dots of recording lights blinking like fireflies in the dim gate. "Did he really say captain?" one man muttered. "I think so," another replied. "And he sounded official." The little girl from before piped up again, her innocence unfiltered. "Mommy, I told you, he really is a pilot." The mother hushed her, but her cheeks burned with embarrassment. She had believed the attendant's word too easily. Captain Williams stood tall, his hands clasped behind his back, the posture of discipline. He didn't need to shout, didn't need to argue. The silence he carried unsettled her more than rage ever could. "You're not fooling anyone." The attendant snapped. Though her words seemed aimed more at herself than at him, she thrust his ID back toward him, shoving it against his chest. "Fake plastic and a fake title, that's all you are." He didn't take it. He let it fall between them, the plastic sliding across the polished floor until it stopped at a passenger's feet. The man in the suit who had sneered earlier bent to pick it up, intending to prove it false. But as his eyes scanned the badge, his expression shifted. It bore the airline's logo. The holographic strip glimmered authentically. The name, Captain Darius Williams, was etched in bold beneath the gold insignia. The businessman's throat tightened. He hesitated, then handed the ID back carefully. His muttered words betrayed him. "Looks real enough." A ripple passed through the crowd. Doubt had shifted. The attendant's smile cracked for the first time, but she recovered quickly, her pride refusing to collapse. She turned sharply toward the suit-wearing man. "You don't know what a real ID looks like. Don't embarrass yourself." But her voice lacked conviction now. Williams finally spoke, his voice calm, unhurried. "You can keep shouting, but truth doesn't need volume." Her breath hitched, barely visible, but enough for the crowd to notice. The more he stayed composed, the smaller she seemed in comparison. Phones tilted closer. A college student whispered into her mic while streaming live. "This is insane. She's accusing a pilot at his own gate. I think she's about to get fired." The attendant heard it, her face flushed crimson. "You think this is funny?" she snapped at the crowd. "You're all just standing there, recording lies? He doesn't belong here. People like him." She stopped herself too late. The words hung in the air, poisonous and heavy. People like him. Passengers stiffened. Even those who had stayed silent before now stirred with discomfort. A young black couple in the corner exchanged a bitter glance. The man muttered under his breath, "There it is. Always comes down to that." Williams didn't react outwardly, but inside, a familiar ache pressed against his ribs. How many times had he heard those words dressed in different clothes? Sometimes subtle, sometimes sharp, always the same poison. He stepped closer, his shadow falling across her. "Choose your next words carefully," he said quietly. The attendant faltered. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, her lips trembling with words she couldn't gather. Before she could recover, a sharp voice cut through the terminal. "Excuse me, what seems to be the problem here?" Heads turned as two men in dark uniforms strode toward the gate, airport operations staff summoned by his call. Their badges gleamed beneath the fluorescent lights. The crowd exhaled in relief, murmurs rising again. The attendant forced a triumphant smile. "Perfect timing. Arrest this man. He's impersonating a pilot." But the operations officers didn't. "Look at her." Their eyes went straight to Williams. And then, almost in unison, they straightened their posture and gave him a respectful nod. "Captain Williams," one of them said, "we got your call." The terminal erupted in gasps. The flight attendant froze. The cracks in her armor were no longer invisible. They were widening, threatening to split her pride in two. And Williams simply stood there, calm as ever, watching her arrogance begin to unravel. "Captain Williams," the taller of the two operations officers repeated, his tone respectful. "We came as quickly as possible." Gasps rippled across the terminal. The word captain echoed like a verdict. Passengers exchanged stunned glances. Phones tilted closer, and the hum of whispers grew louder. The flight attendant's face drained of color. For a split second her mask cracked. Fear flickered in her eyes, but pride stitched it back together. She forced a laugh, brittle and sharp. "You can't be serious," she sneered. This is a joke. He's tricking you too." The taller officer frowned. "Ma'am, this man is a senior captain with our airline. We've worked with him for years." The words hit like thunder. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the passengers. The little girl clapped her hands. "I knew it. He's the real pilot." Her mother didn't hush her this time. She just stared at the attendant, shame creeping into her cheeks. The attendant's breathing quickened. Her authority, once absolute, now hung by a fraying thread. She stepped forward, pointing at Williams, her voice shrill. "You don't understand. He doesn't belong here. People like him." Her sentence died in her throat. The weight of dozens of phones recording her froze her tongue. Still, her pride refused to bend. "I won't be disrespected by some fraud," she finished weakly. Williams remained calm, his silence louder than her hysteria. He adjusted his hat, placed it firmly on his head, and met her glare with eyes steady as stone. "Respect isn't something you demand," he said evenly. "It's something you earn." The officers exchanged a glance. One of them stepped closer to her, his voice firm. "Ma'am, I suggest you lower your tone. You're speaking to a decorated pilot, and you're doing it in front of passengers." The crowd stirred. Passengers who had once stayed silent now shifted visibly, some shaking their heads, others murmuring support for Williams. "He handled it better than I ever could," a young man whispered. "He's got more class in his silence than she has." "In her shouting," added another. The flight attendant's lips trembled. "You're all being fooled. Don't you see, he's not one of us." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and this time there was no mistaking the venom. Behind them, a heavy silence fell. Even the intercom seemed to pause, holding its announcements back as if unwilling to interrupt. Williams tilted his head slightly, regarding her not with anger, but with the quiet disappointment of a teacher watching a student fail a lesson. "You reveal more about yourself than you ever will about me," he said softly. The passengers stirred, their whispers sharpening into judgment. The businessman who had doubted him earlier shifted uncomfortably, muttering. She went too far, and the operations officer's tone hardened. "Ma'am, step aside. Now." But the attendant clung to her fading power like a drowning woman grasping at water. She raised her chin, her voice trembling but loud enough to reach the crowd. "If you let him board, I'll file a complaint. I'll tell corporate. I won't work on a plane with him." The silence that followed was brutal. Passengers stared, stunned. Some gasped audibly. A woman near the back muttered, "Did she really just say that out loud?" Williams didn't respond immediately. He simply exhaled slowly, letting the weight of her words sink into the crowd. Then, he turned, not to her, but to the passengers. His gaze swept the room, calm, steady, unshaken. "You've all heard her," he said quietly. "And now you—" "No, the truth isn't about me, it's about her," the crowd murmured in agreement. Phones recorded every word, every flicker of emotion, every collapse of her pride. The attendant's face crumbled. Her smirk had vanished. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "This isn't over! You'll see!" But the words sounded hollow, even. To her. Williams placed one gloved hand on the counter, leaning slightly forward. His eyes met hers with the finality of a closing door. "It already is," he said. The gate was no longer her stage. It had become her downfall. The silence didn't last. From the back of the gate, a voice rose, steady, disbelieving. "You just said you won't work with him. Are you hearing yourself?" All eyes swung toward the speaker, a middle-aged woman clutching her suitcase handle with white knuckles. Her voice trembled with anger, not fear. "He's a pilot. He's your superior. And you've humiliated him in front of all of us? The crowd stirred. A businessman shook his head. Unbelievable. Shameful, someone else muttered. Dot. The flight attendant's face burned. You don't understand. I was protecting this airline from fraud. Protecting? A young black man stood up, phone in hand, his voice cutting sharp. You ripped his ID, called him a liar, and told everyone he doesn't belong. That's not protection. That's prejudice. Applause broke out, scattered at first, then stronger. The sound filled the terminal like waves crashing against the shore. Dot Williams remained still, his posture straight, his hands behind his back. He didn't smile, didn't raise a hand to quiet the crowd. He didn't need to. The truth was speaking for him. Dot. The attendant's eyes darted from face to face, searching desperately for an ally. She spotted the suited businessman who had doubted earlier. You saw it too. Tell them he's faking. But the man shifted uncomfortably, shaking his head. I saw it, Captain, and I saw you go too far. His voice cracked with guilt. I believed you at first, but not anymore. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Her grip on control slipped further with every second. You're all blind, she snapped, voice shrill. He's tricking you. This is my gate, my flight, my... Not anymore, one of the operations officers interrupted, his tone firm. This gate belongs to the airline, and Captain Williams outranks you in every sense. The crowd murmured in agreement, phones still recording. Dot. The attendant's chest rose and fell rapidly. She was cornered, surrounded not by enemies but by the truth she had created for herself. Dot Williams finally stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking softly against the tiled floor. He stopped just a few feet from her, his shadow stretching, across the counter where she once stood triumphant. When you shouted, they listened, he said, voice low, steady. But now in your silence they see you. Her lips trembled. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. His words cut gently but firmly, leaving no room for escape. And the passengers will remember it. The cameras will remember it. Most of all, you will remember it. A hush swept through the crowd, heavy and undeniable. A woman whispered to her friend, he doesn't need to yell. Every word feels like a sentence. The attendant tried to rally one last time, her pride refusing to let her collapse fully. This isn't fair. You people don't understand what it's like to... To what? A passenger interrupted sharply. To look down on someone because of the color of his skin? Her words died in her throat. Dot gasps, comma murmurs, nods. The crowd turned fully now, their judgment falling heavy as stone. Dot. The little girl who had defended Williams earlier tugged on her mother's sleeve. Mommy, why is she so mean to him? The mother swallowed hard, her voice hushed. Because some people think they're better than others, but they're not. The little girl's innocent question struck harder than any argument. Even the attendant's face faltered at it. Dot Williams bowed his head slightly toward the child, his calm dignity unbroken. Thank you, he said softly, his voice warm despite the storm around him. Dot. The crowd erupted into quiet applause again, stronger this time, echoing across the terminal. Dot. The flight attendant's hands trembled visibly now, her voice cracked, defensive and desperate. You're all making a mistake. He doesn't deserve that uniform. But the moment she said it, she realized it was over. Dot passengers booed softly. Others shook their heads. The cameras caught every word, sealing her fate. Dot Williams looked at her one last time, his eyes steady, filled not with hatred but with quiet finality. The only thing I don't deserve, he said calmly, is your disrespect. Her breath hitched. Her pride was crumbling. Dot. And the terminal, once her stage, had become her courtroom. Dot. The applause faded into a tense silence, thick enough to choke on. Every phone was raised now, every passenger waiting, watching. The flight attendant's chest heaved as she scanned the sea of faces, all of them mirrors reflecting back her arrogance. "This isn't right," she stammered, her voice breaking. "You're all against me. You don't know what he's capable of." "What he's capable of," one of the operations officers interrupted sharply, "is flying an aircraft safely through storms, nights and skies you'll never understand. What you're capable of is this." He gestured toward the stunned passengers, toward the sea of recording phones, toward the wreckage of her pride. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shaking their heads at the audacity of her defense. The attendant's eyes darted wildly, searching for escape. "I was just doing my job. You think I wanted this? He made me—" Williams's voice cut through, soft yet unyielding. "I made you nothing. You chose." The words landed like a gavel. The passengers stirred. A woman whispered to her friend, "Every time he speaks, it's like truth itself." Williams didn't move closer, didn't raise his hand or voice. He simply stood with his hat under one arm, his shoulders straight, his eyes steady. His silence pressed down heavier than her screams ever had. The flight attendant tried to lash out again, her desperation leaking through every syllable. "You're all being fooled by his calm act. Don't you see, he's dangerous, he's not one of us, he—" Her words faltered. She caught herself, but too late. Phones zoomed in. Passengers gasped audibly. The poison of her prejudice was naked. Now stripped of excuses. The businessman who had once doubted stepped forward at last. His voice trembled with both shame and conviction. "I was wrong about you, Captain, and I was wrong to listen to her." He turned toward the attendant, his tone sharper now. "We all were, but not anymore." Her lips parted, but no words came. Williams inclined his head slightly, his calmness wrapping the crowd in quiet dignity. He didn't need to gloat. The truth had already crowned him. The younger operations officer stepped closer to her, lowering his voice, but not enough to hide it from the crowd. "Do you realize what you've done? This isn't just misconduct, this is public humiliation recorded on 100 devices. The attendant's breath hitched audibly. Her pride cracked further. Williams finally addressed her directly. His tone calm, deliberate. "The sky doesn't care about arrogance. Up there it humbles everyone equally. You might want to learn that before it's too late." Her face flushed, but tears glistened at the corners of her eyes. For the first time, her mask of superiority looked fragile. Paper-thin. Passengers whispered again. He's teaching her. A lesson without even raising his voice. It's like watching dignity crush arrogance, another added. The attendant shook her head violently, her voice rising again. "No, you're not going to ruin me. I've worked too hard for this." "I won't let him," but the words stuck. Her voice cracked mid-sentence, the sound more pitiful than powerful. Williams simply looked at her. Not with triumph, not with cruelty, but with the calm certainty of someone who had endured storms and knew they always pass. Then he spoke, his final line quiet but sharp as glass. "You've already ruined yourself." The terminal went utterly silent. Even the intercom seemed to hesitate before announcing the next flight. The attendant stood frozen, trembling in front of the very crowd she once commanded. And Captain Williams, unshaken, let the silence do the rest. The silence at gate B-17 had weight, like a storm cloud pressing down on the terminal. Dozens of phones stayed fixed in the air, capturing every breath, every trembling word, every subtle shift in power. The flight attendant's breathing was sharp and uneven, her chest rising and falling as if she was suffocating under invisible pressure. "You can't all just believe him," she muttered, her voice trembling. "This is insane. He's lying. He has to be." But her eyes betrayed her words. They darted across the crowd, seeking an ally, finding none. The businessman who had once doubted shook his head slowly. "No one believes you anymore. We saw what you did, we heard what you said. Her hands clenched into fists. You don't understand. I've given years to this airline. I've worked. Double shifts, holidays. Do you think I'll just let someone like him? Her words caught again, poisoned by the prejudice she could no longer hide. Captain Williams didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He only stood there, his posture steady, his silence heavier than her shouting. His presence filled the space, calm and immovable, like the captain of a ship weathering chaos on deck. "Say something," she shrieked at him, suddenly her voice breaking with desperation. "Defend yourself." Williams finally spoke, his voice deep, resonant, unshaken. "I don't need to defend myself. The truth doesn't need defense." The words rolled across the crowd, settling like judgment. Murmurs swelled. Someone whispered, "He's destroying her without even trying." The younger operations officer stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Ma'am, this is over. You need to stop before you make this worse." Her laugh was sharp, hollow. "Worse? It can't get worse. My career, my reputation, he's ruined everything." "You ruined yourself," the older officer said quietly. The crowd shifted, the truth undeniable now. A woman in the back called out, "We all saw it. You humiliated him for no reason." Another voice added, "You tore his ID, accused him of lying, told him he didn't belong." Each accusation struck her like a blow. Her knees weakened, but her pride kept her standing, trembling on fragile legs. I didn't mean," she whispered. But the words rang empty. Williams's eyes softened for a brief moment, not in pity, but in recognition. He had seen this collapse before, arrogance folding under the weight of dignity. "You meant every word," he said gently, almost like a teacher correcting a child. And the world heard it. Phones stayed fixed on her, little red dots blinking, recording the end of her facade. The attendant shook her head violently, her voice rising again, manic now. "No, they'll understand. Corporate will take my side. They always do." Williams tilted his head slightly, his calmness unbroken. "Make the call then, let them decide." The challenge lingered, sharp and undeniable. But she didn't reach for her phone. She couldn't. Her hand hovered near her pocket, trembling, before falling limply to her side. Deep down, she knew the truth. The recordings, the witnesses, the silence of the crowd, all of it was against her. A ripple of whispers moved through the passengers. "She knows it's over. She's finished." Williams turned slightly, addressing the crowd now, his voice low but steady. "What happened here isn't new. This is what silence has allowed for too long. But silence ends when truth is spoken." The passengers nodded, their murmurs growing into soft words of agreement. Some even applauded quietly, not out of spectacle, but out of respect. The attendant's tears finally broke free, streaking down the carefully painted lines of her face. She wiped at them furiously, refusing to let them show, but it was too late. Her voice cracked, broken. "You don't understand. This uniform, this job, it's all I have." Williams looked at her, his tone still calm, unshaken. "Then you should have respected it." Gasps echoed through the gate. The line cut deep, slicing through the last threads of her pride. Her shoulders slumped. Her once rigid stance collapsed into something smaller, weaker, human. For the first time she looked less like a figure of authority, and more like a woman unraveling under the weight of her own arrogance. The older officer gestured gently toward the side. "Ma'am, please step away. We'll handle this from here." But she didn't move. She stood frozen, shaking her head, whispering to herself, "This can't be happening, and not like this." Williams adjusted his hat, placing it firmly back on his head. His eyes swept across the passengers, his voice firm yet warm. "Thank you for your patience," he said, the tone of a true captain. "You've witnessed the truth. Now let's move forward." The crowd erupted into applause, louder now, rising. Like a wave crashing against the last remnants of her pride, the flight attendant covered her face with trembling hands. Her collapse was complete. Not by force, not by anger, but by the weight of her own words and the dignity of the man she tried to tear down. And Williams stood in the center of it all, calm as stone, letting the silence of her downfall speak. Louder than anything else, the crowd was restless now, the silence shifting into a low hum of voices. Phones stayed raised like courtroom recorders, their lenses locked on the woman trembling under the fluorescent lights of Gate B17. Captain Williams adjusted his cuffs slowly, every movement deliberate, calm. He pulled out his phone, his voice measured. "Since you don't believe who I am," he said, "perhaps it's best someone else tells you." The attendant flinched, shaking her head quickly. "No, you don't need to do that. There's no reason to—" But Williams had already dialed. The ring echoed faintly, and with every tone her face drained of color. The crowd hushed, leaning in. Even the officers paused, waiting. "Good evening," Williams said smoothly when the call connected. "This is Captain Elijah Williams. Put me through to the Chief Operations Officer, please." The title rolled out like thunder. Gasps rippled through the passengers. A few exchanged wide-eyed glances. The attendant stumbled backward a step, her lips parting. No, this isn't happening." Within seconds the line connected. A crisp, professional voice answered. "Captain Williams, what's the matter?" Williams didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words were a scalpel cutting through the air. "I'm standing at Gate B17. One of your attendants just tore my ID and accused me of impersonating a pilot. She's publicly humiliated me in front of staff and passengers." The murmur spread like wildfire. Someone whispered, "He called the top brass." Another whispered back, "She's done." The voice on the phone hardened instantly. "What? Who? Give me her name." The attendant's knees buckled slightly. She shook her head violently. Please don't." Williams's gaze never left her. "You'll have it in writing. I want it handled immediately. This isn't the first time, but it will be the last." A chilling silence followed. Then the voice said firmly, "Consider it done, Captain. She won't work another flight." The line disconnected with a sharp click. The attendant staggered as if the floor itself shifted beneath her. Her hand clutched at her chest, her breath coming in shallow gasps. You couldn't." Williams slipped his phone back into his pocket, his calm unbroken. "I didn't end your career. You did." The crowd's whispers turned into low applause, then swelled louder. Some passengers cheered, their voices sharp and clear. She had it coming. That's real justice. Dignity always wins. The attendant's eyes darted wildly, her carefully painted face cracking with sweat and tears. She lunged forward, her voice breaking into hysteria. "You don't know what this means. I've worked 15 years for this airline. 15 years. I gave my life to it." Her words were ragged, desperate, clawing for sympathy. But no one moved to comfort her. No one spoke in her defense. Williams stood tall, his voice steady. "And yet in those years you forgot the one rule that matters most, respect." The terminal echoed with silence again, heavier now, pressing on every heart. The officers exchanged a glance. The younger one stepped closer, placing a gentle but firm hand on her arm. "Ma'am, it's over. Please come with us." She jerked, her arm away, her voice shrill. "No, I won't leave like this. I won't be paraded out like some criminal." But the crowd's stares cut her deeper than any escort ever could. She was already paraded, already exposed, already judged. Williams exhaled softly, his expression unreadable. His voice dropped, calm, yet final. "The choice is yours. Walk with dignity, or let arrogance drag you down further, but either way the truth has already spoken. Her lip trembled. Her eyes searched the crowd again for even one sympathetic face. None came. Every gaze was cold, detached, or silently condemning. Finally, her strength broke. Shoulders slumped. She let the officer guide her a step away, her body heavy as if every ounce of pride had been stripped from her bones. A woman in the crowd whispered, almost reverently, "That was the sound of power without shouting." Williams straightened his hat, his calm composure untouched. He glanced at the passengers. "Thank you for your patience. The flight will continue." The applause returned, stronger now, swelling like thunder rolling through the terminal. The attendant covered her face with shaking hands as the officers guided her away, the sound of clapping chasing her down the concourse. Williams stood still. The storm passed, his dignity intact, his silence louder than any argument she had ever tried to make. And for the first time, the passengers didn't just see a pilot. They saw a leader. The sound of her footsteps faded down the terminal, swallowed by the applause and murmurs of the passengers. Gate B-17 no longer felt like just a waiting area. It felt like a courtroom where judgment had been delivered, and truth had finally spoken. Captain Williams stood steady, his uniform still crisp, his posture unbroken. He hadn't raised his voice once, yet the entire terminal felt the gravity of his presence. One passenger, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, stepped forward cautiously. "Captain," she said softly, I want to thank you for standing your ground, for showing us what dignity looks like." Williams gave her a polite nod, his tone calm. "Thank you for speaking. Truth only survives when it's shared." Her eyes glistened. She wasn't the only one moved. All around, people who had been silent during the confrontation now found their voices. A young man with earbuds pulled them out and said firmly, "She thought she could get away with it. People like her always do. But you showed everyone different. Today," another voice rose from the back, "it's about time someone like her faced consequences." The murmurs grew louder, bolder. What had once been quiet observation was now open conversation, voices overlapping, stories spilling. An elderly black man with a cane hobbled forward, his voice trembling with both age and emotion. "I flew this airline 20 years ago. Got told once I was in the wrong seat, that maybe I couldn't afford it." Didn't say a word, sat in silence. He looked at Williams, his eyes wet. "You didn't sit in silence today." Williams felt the weight of that moment, but he didn't let emotion break his composure. He gave a slow nod. "Your silence carried pain. Mine carried truth. They're not the same." The crowd quieted for a beat, absorbing his words. The younger operations officer approached, straightening his tie nervously. His tone carried respect now, not authority. "Captain Williams, I just want to apologize on behalf of the staff. What she did was unacceptable, and we should have stepped in sooner." Williams studied him for a long moment, then said evenly, "Apologies matter less than actions. Next time, don't wait for silence to be broken by someone else." The officer swallowed hard, nodding. "Yes, sir, you're right." From the corner, someone whispered, "He's teaching them while he's standing here." The energy in the gate shifted from spectacle to something deeper. People weren't just watching anymore, they were reflecting. A teenager, phone still. A recording asked hesitantly, "Captain, do you think this will change anything, or will it just go away after today?" William's eyes lifted, steady and resolute. "Change doesn't begin with institutions. It begins with witnesses. You all saw, you all heard. What you do with it now decides if it fades, or if it grows." The terminal was silent again, but not the heavy silence of fear. This silence carried weight, understanding, Responsibility. Then, softly at first, passengers began clapping again. Not the chaotic applause from before, but something steadier, united, deliberate. It echoed like a promise, carrying through the polished floors and glass walls of the terminal. Williams did not bask in it. He simply adjusted his cap, nodded once, and stood in quiet dignity as the sound swelled. The older officer, who had been quiet through most of the ordeal, finally spoke. "Captain, I've seen plenty of men in uniform lose their temper when disrespected. But you didn't need anger. You had something stronger." Williams glanced at him. "Anger fades. Dignity endures." The officer lowered his eyes, ashamed of his own silence during the incident. "I'll remember that." In the distance, the intercom crackled to life, calling for boarding. The normal rhythm of travel resumed, but the people at Gate B-17 knew they hadn't witnessed anything ordinary. A's passengers began lining up. Many looked at Williams with a newfound respect. Some nodded quietly. Others placed a hand over their chest. One child tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mum, is he a hero?" The mother knelt and whispered back, "He's more than that. He's a man who knew his worth." Williams overheard, but did not react. He carried himself with the same calm grace, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside he knew the moment mattered, not for him, but for every silent witness who now held a piece of the truth. The final image of the attendant being led away, broken and silent, lingered like a shadow in everyone's memory. But the stronger image was this: a black captain standing tall in his uniform, unshaken, his voice steady, his dignity untouched. And that image would not fade quickly. It would ripple outward, spreading in stories, in whispers, in videos shared across screens far beyond Gate B-17. The aftermath was not silence anymore. It was a quiet revolution. The morning sun cut through the tall glass windows of the terminal, casting long beams across the polished floor. The crowd had thinned, but the air still vibrated with the echoes of what had unfolded at Gate B-17. Captain Williams stood near the jet bridge, hat in hand, reviewing the flight manifest. His composure was the same as it had been from the start: calm, focused, immovable. To him, this was not about spectacle, it was about principle. A supervisor in a navy blazer approached, his expression grave. "Captain Williams," he said, voice low but respectful. "Corporate called. The attendant's contract has been terminated effective immediately. She's being escorted off premises as we speak." Williams looked up, his eyes steady. "Thank you." The supervisor hesitated, then added, "They asked me to personally extend their apology to you. What happened was unacceptable." Williams gave a single nod. "Apologies matter. But what matters more is what you do from here. Remember that." The supervisor swallowed, nodding quickly. "Yes, sir. Understood." As he walked away, Williams slipped the manifest back into its folder. His hand was steady, but inside he carried the quiet weight of years. This wasn't the first time. It had just finally been witnessed. Passengers began boarding, their voices softer than usual, their eyes filled with something different: respect. Some stopped briefly to speak. "Captain," a young woman said, clutching her ticket, "I've never seen someone handle injustice like that." "Thank you," an older man added. "My kids were watching. You showed them what strength looks like. They won't forget it." Williams simply replied the same way each time. "Safe travels." Every acknowledgement was met with calm humility. He didn't claim victory. He didn't gloat. He let the truth stand on its own. Near the end of the boarding line, the elderly, black man with the cane appeared again. He paused at the gate, his eyes glistening. "You gave us all something today, son. You gave us proof. Proof that dignity can outlast hate." William's voice softened. It was always there. It just needed to be seen. The man nodded, tears slipping free. And now, it has been. As the last passengers filed in, the younger operations officer approached again. His posture was straighter now, his tone respectful. "Captain, I want you to know I won't stay silent next time. I learned that from you." Williams studied him for a moment. "Then my silence wasn't wasted." The officer gave a firm nod before stepping back. Williams placed his hat back on, adjusting it with care. Then, with steady strides, he walked onto the jet bridge. The hum of the aircraft grew louder, the metal giant waiting like a promise inside. The cockpit, the familiar scent of leather and metal greeted him. He slid into the captain's seat, his hands brushing over the instruments with practiced ease. Here in this space he was more than uniform, more than authority. Here he was home. Through the window he could see the runway stretching into the horizon, endless and bright. The sky did not care about skin color, about arrogance, about prejudice. The sky only cared about skill, about truth, about who was capable of guiding others safely through it. He keyed the intercom, his voice smooth and steady. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Williams. Welcome aboard. Today's flight will be smooth, and we'll get you safely to your destination." A ripple of applause broke out from the cabin. It wasn't protocol, but it was honest. The passengers who had witnessed everything carried their respect with them, and they wanted him to know it. Williams allowed himself the faintest smile, not of pride, but of quiet satisfaction. Justice had spoken, and not with fire, but with calm. Far behind him, somewhere in a corporate office, the flight attendant sat in silence, stripped of her badge and uniform, her world collapsing in on itself. She had built her career on arrogance, and it had turned to dust in her hands. No cameras followed her now. No one applauded her name. Her silence was heavy, but it was not dignified. It was the silence of regret. The jet engines roared to life, vibrating through the cabin. The aircraft taxied forward, powerful and unshaken, just like the man at its helm. As the plane lifted into the morning sky, Captain Williams gazed ahead, his eyes steady, his hands sure. The blue stretched endless. Before him, wide and free. The sky belonged to him. And no one could take that away.